Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the regular council meeting for Monday, April 24th, 2017. The clerk tonight is Ms. Sheila Gurry. I want to first recognize that we're holding this meeting on the traditional territory of the Nanaimo First Nations. So, introduction of late items, Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Your Worship. This evening on the addendum, as well as we have one extra late item as well, but on the addendum we're adding agenda item 8D, which is Old City Quarter Business Improvement Area, and with an attached bylaw. And we're also adding a delegation from Mr. Eric McLean regarding this report. We are adding agenda item 9A, a delegation request from Mr. Leon Cake regarding Property Maintenance and Standards Bylaw 2017, number 7242. And we're adding agenda item 9H, correspondence dated April 18th, 2017, from Louis and Margot Sucra regarding their concerns with the proposed development variance permit 309 and 1553 Bartlett Street. And that's it, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Does council have any further late items? I would like to add an additional delegation to, I believe, 9A. Pardon me, or is it 9B? Mr. Reid Bodwright. 9B for Mr. Reid Bodwright. And we've got an additional late item, and that is, I would like to put it under 6A, call it 6A and 6B, in place of the mayor's report. And that would be council seating arrangement and appointment of an RDN director. Thank you. Any other, council? Seeing none, can I have a motion to introduce, or pardon me, a motion to amend the agenda, or pardon me, to adopt the agenda as amended? Moved by Councillor Kipp, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So we have a number of minutes to get through. I'm going to read them all as one for the adoption of minutes. Unless anybody has identified any one of them that they wish to speak to, and that is that's the regular special council meeting for March 20th, the regular council meeting for March 20th, the special meeting of council for March 24th, special meeting of council for March 27th, special meeting of council for March 27th, and minutes of the special meeting of council for April 3rd, regular meeting of council for April 3rd, and that's it, as a block. Moved by Councillor Bestwick? Yes. Thank you. Is there a seconder? Second. Seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is the Mayor's Poetry Challenge. Mr. Chris Barfoot, Recreation Coordinator, to introduce a reading by the City of Nanaimo's Poet Laureate.
Hello, Mayor, Council, staff, and guests. The opportunity to bring poetry before Council once again is such an honor. Formally called the Mayor's Poetry Challenge, Poetry City is an annual celebration of poetry facilitated by mayors and council across Canada. Originally initiated by Regina's Mayor, Pat Fiacco, in 2012, the Poetry Challenge is now taken up with mayors and councils across Canada in many cities to celebrate National Poetry Month and to continue to raise the profile of literary arts in Canada. The City of Nanaimo, through its development and support of the Poet Laureate programs, and initiatives and programs such as the Nanaimo's Poetry Map and the newly established Poetry Walk are just examples of the support and just the tip of the quill to all the wonderful and outstanding literary and poetic achievements that are evident in this beautiful city. It gives me great pleasure to invite both of Nanaimo's Poet Laureates to read in front of you once again for the 2017 Poetry Challenge. Just to update you, both have been extremely busy reading and participating in many community events. Miss Tina Biello has recently been reading down at Victoria City Council and joining forces with her with the Poet Laureate of Victoria, Yvonne Blomer. And Kaylee DeFair has been recently reading at a youth event at the Nanaimo Port Theatre. So please join me in welcoming Miss Tina Biello, Nanaimo's newest Poet Laureate, and Miss Kaylee DeFair, Nanaimo's inaugural Youth Poet Laureate, as they read for you.
Thank you. Again, an honor to be here. I did have the privilege of going to Victoria, and I have to tell you, you have a much newer building than they do.
Just move that mic down a wee bit,
Yeah,
Tina, there.
for
You might
sure.
find that more
Yeah.
comfortable.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So I did read there this month, and I extended the invitation to Yvonne to come and read to a council meeting here this year sometime. Would be fabulous. She couldn't make it tonight, otherwise she would have been here. So because it's Poetry Month, I wrote a piece about poetry and recently learned that the word poet comes from the Greek word poetis. I'm not saying that right, which means to make. So a poet is someone who makes something. So this poem is called, What Does a Poem Do? This poem will not keep you warm. It will not protect your skin from the sun. You cannot carry anything inside this poem. It is not there for you to use as a purse, a backpack, briefcase, or moving box. It will not make your breakfast or drive you to work and park your car. It will not hand you the nails as you hammer on the roof or pour you the cement when you fill the potholes from last winter. But this poem will make you something you will never forget. It will take you to your mother's dying bed, your firstborn smile, and your soon-to-be last breath. It will remind you to feel that wind on your cheek and water on your feet and listen for the susurration, the whisper inside that takes you home. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kaylee DeFair. I'm going to read you. This is called Every Day is Judgment Day. Nodding off in the fifth pew was a narcoleptic Christian. Shaking in the seventh pew, an alcoholic in remission. And in the front row, an info isn't looking to be forgiven. Neither is a physician on self-prescribed prescriptions. The narcoleptic drinks her coffee as black as her world behind closed eyes, downs cup after cup and still sleeps all day, no matter what the physician may advise. The alcoholic drinks his whiskey straight to try to forget that he is not, as the nympho whispers to his woman above sheets, restless to get caught. We all have our demons and our vices for times we hit the heavy blues. We all have our reasons and our prices and can't walk in another man's shoes. Come morning, we all have decisions to make, dispositions to fake, illnesses, addictions, relationships to take on. Just mind that you sing your own tune perfectly before judging another man's song.
Thank you very much, and welcome to both of you. Mr. Barfoot, what exactly was that? The tip of the quill. Motion to receive the presentation, please. Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Brennan. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The next item is something that I take great pleasure in being involved with, and this is concerning a couple of events that have taken place in the last 6 months in the city of Nanaimo. On January 31st, 2017, during a seniors recreation skating session at Frank Crane Arena, a man went down on the ice. This is not an unusual event, but that day it was very different. When program leader Stacey Patterson and participant Ed Hayes raced over to him, they expected to find a head injury. Instead, the man was non-responsive, had no pulse, and was not breathing. Stacey raced across the ice to get the automatic external defibrillator, otherwise known as an AED. She was met by her husband, Gary, who's the city's recreation coordinator for arenas. They quickly returned to the victim's side, opened his shirt, and started the process of attaching the AED. 2 lifeguards then arrived, and one of them, Brittany Johnson, took over CPR. A combination of staying calm, allowing their training to take over, and the AED device and its use brought the victim back. It is the training and dedication of city employees whose jobs do not include first aid as a first responder that changed one man's life that day. Thank you for your dedication, your swift action, your calm heads, and your determination to a positive outcome that changed many lives that day. We recognize the following 4 city employees for their work that day: Stacey Patterson, Gary Patterson, Brittany Johnson, and Janice Batty. I understand Janice is a little bit camera shy and won't be joining us tonight. This next one was on October 17th. Mr. Richie Fulla, a longtime employee and a waterworks foreman, was like any other day on his way to work when he happened upon a man lying face down on Lost Lake Road. He stopped and discovered he wasn't breathing. So he started conducting CPR on the man. Almost immediately, another person came along and Mr. Fuller instructed him to call 911, which he did. In short order, emergency services arrived on the scene, and with the use of a defibrillator, crews were able to bring the man back. If it hadn't been for the quick action of Mr. Fuller, his knowledge and his training in first responder CPR, the assistance of the additional passerby, and all involved working as a team, the person on the road would not be alive today. There are over 70,000 cardiac arrests in Canada every year. Thanks to Canadians being so familiar with basic first aid, over 70% of them are alive today due to their actions. If you don't have a basic first aid certificate, please invest in the training so readily available in Nanaimo. You have no idea when you may give a fellow citizen a second chance of life. From Mayor and Council, we wish to officially recognize each of the people standing in front of you for going above and beyond in the course of their daily lives. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Richie Fulla, Miss Stacey Patterson, Gary Patterson, Brittany Johnson. Please come forward. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you to these people for going the extra mile, for looking back into their brains and understanding that little voice back there was the one that's teaching them how to remember what they were taught. And it was through their efforts that there are families that still have their family members with us. Ladies and gentlemen, our heroes. Thank you very much. The next item, Councillor Fuller, did you want to speak?
Yeah, I did. I'm only here myself because of people like these that we're just honoring. And people need to know that whether you know first aid or not, it is the quickness that it started. And whether you're doing it right or wrong, if you're doing those chest compressions, you're doing it right. It's great to have first aid, but it's not necessary. And the defibrillators that we have out now, they're even better. But it is the quickness with which the people that were here actually got to the persons and started. without worrying about whether they knew what they were doing or not. Those people would not be here without people like them, and I would not be here without people like them. So really means a lot to me when we can give people back for doing something like that.
Thank you very much. Very well spoken. So the next item is number 6A and 6B. The first one is they replace the mayor's report. The first one is the seating arrangement for council. People may not know that there is in fact a process that Nanaimo councils for many years have used to determine the seating arrangement. And I want to know whether council would like to continue going along or adhering to that policy, or whether they'd like to do something different. So I'll read to you the policy. It has historically been the practice in this municipality that the elected official seating arrangement be determined as follows: that the councillor with the longest continuous seniority sit in the first seat immediately to the right of the mayor, and the next senior councillor be positioned to the left of the mayor, and thereafter back and forth in order of service. However, where there are two or more councillors with the same length of service, then the order is determined by alphabetical order. So I would like to ask the question, does council wish to follow the City of Nanaimo policy concerning seating arrangements in the gallery? Councillor Hong.
Thank you. Yes, I think status quo works for me. I didn't know that we had this bylaw, so I'm happy to go with the way that things have always worked, unless the next council decides otherwise or we have a discussion about it. So I'm happy to go status quo. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. I would suggest that we follow the policy. I'm not certain that is it a bylaw or is it a policy?
No, it's a policy.
Policy. So I certainly would suggest that the policy be adhered to and upheld and fulfilled as it has been since as long as we've been here.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
I like to follow policy. I think that we have a reason for following policy. I'm not sure that I know why the policy wasn't followed. In 2014, when we had our assigned seating, but you know, I'm happy to follow policy. I'm not unhappy to sit where I am, but I mean, I suppose that at the beginning of a term, the policy is there to follow, so that there isn't some sort of arguments about where people sit. I imagine that's the reason for it. So I'm happy to go with the policy.
Thank you. Councillor Yoakum.
Thank you. The second piece, if you could run it, was it consecutive or most years for the second part B of that policy?
Longest continuous seniority.
Continuous.
First part. The second is the next senior, and then back and forth until, if you find that you have two or more councillors with the same length of service, then the order is determined by alphabetical order.
So continuous is number of terms in a row. If there was a break in there, then okay.
That's correct.
Clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have a motion to that effect then, that council moves that starting at our next meeting that we go back to the continuous, or probably the city policy? Do we need a motion? I would like to see that. Sure.
I'm on.
Okay. Go ahead.
I would just so move that council continue with the existing, I'm not sure what policy number it is. Is there a number on it?
No.
Seating arrangement policy at the council table.
Thank you. Councillor Kipp?
The term before,
No, we need a seconder.
oh, second,
Okay,
you're
thank
on the
you.
floor. The term before, when we finished on voting and seniority, Councillor Johnson took the seat and I moved to the other side because of the J come before K. This last term, I did sit next to you for a while, but asked to be relocated, and I think some of our councillors are aware of that, why I asked on that. So I'm quite happy to move back if that's where it is.
And that would follow policy. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next item, 6B, is concerning the appointment to the RDN board. And I will try to make this as simple as we possibly can. So I've reviewed it very carefully. Section 200 of the LGA, the Local Government Act, dictates that primary alternate be appointed to the RDN board to fill a vacancy left by a vacating member until such time as appointment has been made. So the minutes of the October 24th, 2016 meeting indicates that Councillor Fuller is the primary alternate, with Councillor Brennan as the secondary. The minutes are contradictory as they go on to say that a schedule of assignment for primary and secondary alternate directors be established. Well, there's no schedule required if you have a primary and secondary. That's where I think most of council, many of the public are confused as to how it all came about. So that confusion as the primary, secondary alternate brings us to today. I believe the simplest way to deal with the current situation is to simply appoint a replacement director. So I suggest, so the selection for RDN director is determined by voter confidence, number of votes, and experience. Voter confidence is simply the number of votes in the previous civic election. Appointee experience is not defined, but has generally been considered by the city to be continuous service at the city. Example, that's how the seating arrangement is organized. So my recommendation is that council appoint one of the two alternate directors to the position of director to the Regional District Board. And further, I would call for nominations. This is just a suggestion. Council can do it differently if they so desire, but I would just call for nominations. And if voter confidence and experience are considered to be relatively equal, each will be given 1 minute to detail why they should be appointed. Additional information from candidates could be helpful to council, and then I just simply call the vote. It wouldn't be move one candidate versus the other. It would just be all those in favor of candidate A, all those in favor of candidate B, and then we can and we'll get this behind us. The only other thing that I would recommend is at the end that we also come up with another motion that says that the votes be assigned as follows. That myself, Councillor Bestwick, Councillor Kipp, Councillor Yoakum, Councillor Hong, and Councillor Thorpe would be each given 5 votes at the board table, and that the new appointee would be given 4, to make a grand total of 34 out of the 64 votes potential at the regional district. Councillor Kipp, anything further?
Yeah, I'd like to see those policies, and I'm not certain we've had them circulated. I know we've been talking about this for a while. So what you're looking for now is a recommendation to appoint someone.
Sure, just a nomination.
I'd make a nomination for Councillor Fuller.
Okay.
And do I need a seconder for that nomination, or is it just a nomination? So I'd like to speak to it very quickly. Typically, the RDN has been by election votes, and that's what it normally plays out to. There's been some times where people have asked for someone to sit aside or take a year out. There's been of that. And there was once when, because one of the councillors disagreed with the mayor and council of the day, I think they took Lloyd Cherry off by a vote. So it's been determined by the public on a single vote, that one election, and it's been by council confirmation of that election. I guess from my perspective, I'm not certain the vice chair or the chair or those have had any real impact for the city of Nanaimo when I hear that as an experience. Because I've sat through a number of vice chairs now, and I've had little information, I've had little discussion, and I see little benefit sometimes to the chair positions as benefiting the city of Nanaimo, and that's why we're there. So from my perspective, I've watched the budget grow out there from 12 million to 17 million in the previous 5 years, and the next 5 years it's slated from 17 to 24 million. And I think we need a change in some of the thinking and the patterns out there, and that's why I'm supporting Councillor Fuller, just because he was there as the person who won the most votes in that last election. So thank you.
Councillor Hong.
Thank you. I think, like I previously commented, that I'd rather stick with status quo. If the next council decides that they want to do something, then let them do it. Otherwise, when we talk about voter confidence strictly in the terms of how many votes we get, and take away from the experience side. I think I have the least amount of experience, so I shouldn't be on the RDN board if we're going to look at experience. If you're looking at services to the city, as the mayor pointed out in one of his assessments of me, this felt like I've never stepped in council chambers before. So for that reason, I can't vote any otherwise on experience based on anything else, because I don't have that knowledge of what the experience should be. I'm not going to judge one person's experience over another person's experience. The only experience I can judge is my own. So the only defining thing that I can do is voter confidence. And the city of Victoria does exactly just that. To get on the CRD, it is strictly voter confidence on how many votes you got, nothing else. So if we're going to have this discussion, I don't mind having this discussion, but at this point, I would just do status quo and go strictly with voter confidence, which next in line is Councillor Fuller, because he was the alternate director. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Beswick.
Thank you. I'm not sure if there's going to be other nominations. That said, the policy that was established in 1999, I believe it was, in October, by a previous administration than any of us here, I think, and the previous mayor, I think did so in order to protect ourselves from ourselves. It's really a difficult situation to vote for or against a colleague, because, and I believe that's probably why the policy was established as it relates to voter count. And when people run for municipal election, they run to earn a seat. And I think that they invest themselves and their time and their resources and their energy to finish, and if they don't know it the first time around, they certainly figure it out the second time around, that there is a reward, if you will, to finish higher in the polls so that you have the opportunity to earn the experience as a result of the efforts that you put in to be elected and where you were elected, or selected by the community. And in that case, if you're in the top 6. And so we just finished a previous vote on policy. And I think the policy, again, in that was probably established and created so that there was to remove ourselves from that equation, so that the policy is established so that we don't have to deal with who gets to sit beside the mayor to his right or to his left, or who sits the furthest away or whatever. And in this case, I don't think fundamentally there's a lot different about that. So the policy is the policy is the policy. We don't have to like it. We don't have to agree with it. In October or November of every calendar year, I think, is when the council appointees to the regional district are reviewed, if you will. And if it chose to step aside or take the year out or otherwise, then the next person in line on voter record would assumedly take that position, just like they do now if one of us is absent. The first person in line is the next vote. And again, we don't have to like it, we don't have to agree with it, but that's what the policies are there for, is to keep ourselves protected, if you will, from having to get into this politicized, highly politicized, heavily sensitive politicized, supporting or not supporting a member of council or not. So I'll be voting for the policy. My vote isn't against the person, or it's not for the person. It's for the policy that we have. If we want to change the policy, then that's fine. We can make a motion when this is to refer this policy back to staff to come back with a new policy for next October or whenever it is. But in the meantime, that's what the policies are established for. And so I'll be voting for the policy when the vote comes up. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I appreciate your comments and your attempt to keep this simple and non-personal, and I think that's very important. Like has already been expressed, I do not wish to vote against a colleague. In fairness, though, I'm hearing people talk about policy and process, and what I heard you say was that, first of all, we have not had a primary alternate per se. We've had two people who have alternated as primary alternate. And secondly, that the appointment to the RDN would be based on a rather subjective combination of experience and voter confidence. And one person has an edge in voter confidence in terms of votes at the last election. Another person has an edge in terms of experience at this board and previous experience at the RDN. So I think, in fairness, we have to consider that, and I don't think it is cut and dried. And again, I don't want it to be personal, but I think both people are suitable candidates and both deserve consideration. And so for that reason, I would like to nominate Councillor Brennan.
Accept? Councillor Fuller, you would accept? Thank you. Okay, so with respect to policy, you're correct. Policy has not been followed when we declared, when we went away from our alternating, monthly alternating of alternate directors. So it's been done as long as I can remember. So that so we're just trying to get back to policy. I will read the policy. It was approved in 1999, and it's under general administration. And it says, Council to review on a yearly basis the city's appointees to the Regional District of Nanaimo Board of Directors, and that the selection of members of council shall be considered on a combination of experience and voter confidence. So what I was hoping to do, to make it simple, was to just have each one of the candidates provide a short dissertation of a minute or more, or a minute or so, and as to sharing with us their levels of experience that we would take into consideration. And I would hope that, and I believe Council has already stated that they would do it, they would make their decision based on the evidence that they have in front of them. So, Councillor Yoakum.
Thank you. I look for, if we can get Victor, if you can please forward this so-called policy that we're hearing about, because I look forward to the conversation around continued service to the city for experience, because that can be very debatable. I look at, for example, I'll use myself. We'll get a conversation with the two people that are going to run for this. I spent 14 years on Sanemo. We deal with municipal, provincial, federal politics at a high level, great amounts of wealth of experience and input. And if I was in a situation, I'd be under this policy, no experience, which is ludicrous. So I think so I look forward. I want to read the policy, and I think both candidates have probably great wealth of experience. And I don't think we should be benchmarking because of strictly one arena or the other arena for experience. And if we are going to benchmark more continuous service to the city, or is that continuous service to the RDN in the policy? Because there's a difference. Sorry?
That's for the seating.
No.
Continuous services for the seating. Yes, that's correct.
I thought I heard it in this policy conversation.
No.
Experience. I heard someone say experience stated continuous service to the seating.
That's right, for the seating policy.
Doesn't that so what is class? Okay.
This one here, if I could read it again. The selection of members of council shall be considered on a combination of experience and voter confidence. But experience is not defined in this policy.
Okay, that's where, okay. So experience is non-defined. It could be a variety of experience. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I misunderstood. My apologies.
Councillor Hong.
Thank you. If I recall correctly, I think why we ended up doing that alternate between Councillor Fuller and Councillor Brennan was, I think at that time, Councillor Fuller wasn't doing too well. And we thought that it would have been too demanding on him to be consistently as the alternate. So we added Councillor Brennan to it. Was that the reason why? Because I remember at one point, Councillor Thorpe said that he would try being on RDN, and he was considering not being on that as well prior to, but I think that was something separate. But I think it was Councillor Fuller last year we had this discussion that if he wasn't up to it, because he said that he would agree to that as well. Is that?
It was October 2016.
Sorry. This decision was made in October 2016.
Yeah, well, he recovered right after, but I think he was still going through his stuff. So if I'm not mistaken, that's where it was.
I think what we need to do is we need to get on with the discussion. So, Mr. Mema.
Thank you, Worship. That was going to be my point.
Okay.
Once you begin to individualize some of these discussions, you may have to go in camera, so I'll ask you to proceed.
Thank you. So I'm going to suggest that each one would give a short dissertation, and then council can make the decision. I'm just going to call the question after that. So, Councillor Fuller.
Well,
This process has been very political. This has been brought here. I don't know if we've talked much about the RDN in 8 years that I've been here sitting at this table. I've asked about the RDN budget over time. Is it included in our budget? No. That's just a tax requisition. And so we barely talk. We don't talk as a group about the RDN. We don't. If you talk about vice chair, that man has more experience in government than our current vice chair. And not talking Parks and Rec committees. I'm talking. So we don't even talk about this. When Councillor Brennan got elected, I didn't know she was running for the vice chair. I didn't know this councillor was running for vice chair. You've made this so political. This is another one of those issues of mine that I have grave concern with, that you're making petty politics out of an issue that is usually simply cut and dried. And it's very concerning to me to go through this when our business has been waiting now since this started at 1915. We've been 25 minutes on an issue where we rarely even talk about the RDN. We rarely get an email from our vice chair or any of the other people. I, too, am responsible for not sending out a lot of emails from the RDN. But I find this process here right now very flawed, very prescribed, and during this time of hectic chaos, I find it very disappointing that it's done like this. I've known this person and this person for a long time. I don't know who they'd be talking to. We all know them. We've served now for 2 years with them, others with more years. So I don't know what this is about. It's really, really ridiculous to me that we're sitting here for 20 minutes doing this buffoonery to me. It's really, I don't know, and it's for the crowd. That's all it's for. It's not our city business.
So are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting call the question.
Just call the question, Council. Council.
Well, because what are we hearing? A political speech in this that I've never heard anyone. How come I couldn't, in my previous elections when I finished low in the polls, how come I couldn't have stood up and said, I want to be on the RDN board? Because I've got lots of experience. I've done a lot of stuff in my life. But that was never available. And all of a sudden this is made available.
Councillor, if the
So my point of order is, are you ruling that this is typical work or
we have to make a decision, Councillor.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So the challenge is, if this policy had said, shall be considered on experience, there'd be no question, we wouldn't be here today. Or if it had been on voter confidence, we wouldn't be here. It's the combination of both. We have two very good candidates. So, what's council's pleasure? To call the question?
I'd like an opportunity. I think my colleagues have all spoken.
So we do have a speakers list. So we're going to go into the speakers list. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. I need to just speak to the policy and to protect ourselves from this. And the policy is established to protect ourselves from this. And here we are having this, which is unhealthy. And when we talk about being that we've violated our own policy by not having a primary or the primary, as I understand, and you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, that we haven't been following our own policy. Well, we have a primary and a secondary. And if the primary isn't available in the absence of one of the directors, then it defaults to the secondary. So I'm not sure what part of our policy that we haven't been adhering to or following. I don't know. I don't know if both candidates, if you will, have been notified that tonight there would be this opportunity to speak, get ready, prepare. I don't know. So maybe that may or may not be a fair or unfair advantage. And that's why we go to objectivity of the policy, because it is objective. It says voter count. And to keep us out of this mess. And if we choose not to follow our existing policy, then I think that we need to make that follow-up motion, whatever way this goes, to ensure that we don't put the next council in this mess that is playing out in front of the audience, which is fine. I'm cool to be sitting here to having this discussion, no problem. But I don't think it's necessary. I don't think that we should be here doing this on a night of a 200-page agenda. So I don't know where we haven't followed the policy. I don't know what we haven't done, as you noted, that we aren't following our own policy. Well, then if we aren't, then let's get in line with it and follow it. We have one, then let's follow it. What are we doing wrong? What haven't we done? Then, so we have a policy, let's adhere to the policy. If we don't like the policy, make a motion, bring it back in 2 weeks with a new policy. Well, we've got one. We get condemned, criticized, called out, ridiculed every time that we veer off the policy. So now we have one and we want to veer off it because apparently we haven't been following it. And if we haven't been following it, I don't know that we haven't been. So I just think that this puts us in an awful situation. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Mema.
Thank you, Worship. My advice to you is when policies for you to save yourselves from yourselves, and it's always, I think, dangerous to change policy or your practice because you have a decision in front of you. So my advice to you would be you probably want to proceed the way you have always proceeded. So I know you have a line of speakers. I think I would probably say the idea of 1 minute speeches, I don't think you've done that before. So you probably want to drop that. Maybe you can go through your speakers or somebody calls question and you guys can move on. We can have a separate discussion as to how you're going to do the future ones and we can amend the policy. But it's always dangerous to try and change policy or practice because you have a decision in front of you. You run the risk of being misunderstood.
I would tend to agree with you. I think it's time to call the question, so I'm going to do that. So, all those in favor of Councillor Brennan? All those in favor of Councillor Fuller? The representative is Councillor Fuller. Thank you. Get to move on. Next item. No applause required. Thank you. Next item, appointment of the Chief Election Officer and Deputy Chief Election Officer for the 2017 City of Nanaimo by-election. The purpose is to request that Council appoint the Chief Election Officer and Deputy Officer for the 2017 by-election. There's a recommendation on page 33. Move the recommendation. It's been moved by Councillor Bestwick and seconded by Councillor Fuller. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, under Corporate Services, the 2017 Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw. And the purpose is to introduce the Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw 2017 number 7234.01 for first, second, and third reading. Councillor Bestwick, would you read the first reading motion, please?
The recommendation number 1 is that the Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw 2017-7234.01 amend the 2017-21 Financial Plan, pass first reading.
Okay. Seconded by Councillor Hong. Thank you. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed?
That
Show
financial, sorry,
Councillor Brennan opposed. Motion carries.
sorry, that financial plan amendment bylaw 2017-7234.01 pass second reading.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Hall. Thank you. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Certainly. Councillor Brennan.
Yeah. As you can see, I did not support the first reading, and I won't support this budget. I think it is a budget that is too skinny, relies too heavily on reserves, as that was my opinion last budget. It continues to be my opinion. I think this is a politically motivated budget. I think that it has very little to do with the requirements of the city, and for that reason, I won't support a budget like this.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further speakers, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Show Councillor Brennan opposed. Motion carries. And for the third.
That financial plan amendment bylaw 2017-7234.01 pass third reading.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Hall. Any discussion? Councillor Yocum.
Question for staff. Just for clarity, from my recollection, which I remember recalling, now no services with these. I'm very pleased that we don't keep these taxes as low as we could. And we are cutting no services, and services we are not cutting no services, are we?
Mr. Bama.
Thank you. Through the chair.
I know the answer. I just want the public to know that.
Through the chair, thank you. We have not cut any services.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Are we adding any services? Have we responded and added services?
Mr. Bama.
Thank you. If you look at page 35 of your report, somewhere at the bottom there, you have the key budget drivers, which also speak to some service enhancements, as I would call them. You're continuing with your 1%, which is $1 million for asset management. You are adding 2 new positions. That's a service enhancement, as I can see. And I can go down the list, but that's what you have.
Can I ask one more question then? On the expenditure for the RCMP contract, what is the figure that they have asked for? If we were to add the number of officers that they've requested so that we can actually tackle the tasks that we've said were most important to us, what's the number of officers they said they required more?
Thank you, Your Worship. Staff will not comment. That discussion is still in camera. We'll probably bring it up once it's released.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Call the question on that, Ms.
The 8,000 expenditure increase for road repair budgets. Where did that come from? Is that general taxation, or was that out of a reserve, or how did we get that?
There are increases and decreases to expenditures, increases and decreases to revenues. The net is the $1.4 million, so it's a combination of all of those.
Okay. So we are in fact using reserves to keep our tax increase lower. Is that wrong?
Not really, no. So what we've had here is one advantage we had in 2017. Every year we actually have it is growth. That's a big advantage for the city. It's over $1 million. Another advantage we had here was the debt reissuing. That saved us about $700,000. So those were opportunities we took advantage of to keep the property tax at 1.5.
And what had we formerly done with the, what was the second one you said, the debt relief?
The debt, yes.
Had we just put that into general revenue, or had we?
It just ends up being less of a draw on general revenues. That's it.
Okay. And had we formerly put it into any reserves?
No, you can't. You have to do one or the other.
Okay. So 2 weeks ago, we had a Finance and Audit Committee meeting where we were facing a 2.5% increase, I think.
I believe it was 2.1.
2.1. And we reduced that to 1.5.
1.5.
And
that's correct.
what did we use?
The really big difference there was the debt. And we had an opportunity, and we have to do it in the year that it happens, where that debt reissue was reissued for a lower interest rate and just over $600,000 in savings. So a choice, we could have put that savings into a reserve to help fund debt in future years, or we could use it to reduce the property tax increase back down to 1.5 this year. And the direction at the committee was to use it to reduce the property tax increase.
But the original recommendation from staff was the higher increase.
To create the debt reserve, that's correct.
And finally, there were several opportunities for us to reduce services this past year arising out of the core services report. And one of them was to eliminate gender guarding. And these are budget questions.
Sir.
I should think these are budget questions that the community would be interested in knowing the outcome of and what our decisions were.
Sir, we
is that Tim
don't
McGrath?
have participation
Bill
from the
says
gallery.
to stop it, Tim. Bill said to stop it, so I think you should, because I think so too. So,
Please.
adding on to my questions.
Sir, one more out of you, and I'm going to ask you to leave.
So, on the gender guarding issue, did we proceed with that, and did we reap savings out of it?
Okay.
Mr. Mema.
Through the Chair, thank you to Councillor Brennan. The issue of gender guarding is still under consideration. We have not changed our practice. We have internal discussions that we're having with staff. It's not just an issue of gender. It's an issue of other
Yes.
conditions there. So I can't speak to those, but we haven't changed. Gender is still guarding still the practice.
So the instructions were given, but it has not yet been implemented.
It is being implemented. It's a process.
Okay.
Thank you.
Second question then is, what about closure of Beban Pool for the period in the summer? That came before us, and there was quite a bit of interest in that. Did we proceed with that? No, we didn't. And how much did our core review, because that would have been what we spent last year, right? Would that cost us $250,000 approximate? The core review that we had.
Yeah.
How much did that cost us?
Oh gosh, I'd have to look.
Mr. Mema, do you have a
several hundred thousand.
round figure for us?
230.
Yeah.
230.
I'll give around $300,000, somewhere between $200,000 and $300,000.
Thank you.
Councillor Beswick.
Thank you. I kind of lost track of where I was going to start. I'll start by attempting to not be a bystander and ask a member of our audience to refrain from making any comments while discussion and debate is taking place, hopefully without criticism. As it relates to the Finance and Audit Committee that met 2 weeks ago, we discussed road repair, and it was a significant topic coming out of one of our worst winters in 20 years. And we were a little bit over budget, of course, in our clearing sidewalks and roads, et cetera, and then the consequences of the freezing and thawing and the salt and everything else. And in that conversation, and I think the audience needs to understand that the Finance and Audit Committee is a committee made up of the entirety of council, and the entirety of council was, I think, in attendance at that meeting. And what we determined to do was the additional amounts of monies required for the road repair and rehabilitation was to come from reserves. Because one of the things that we hear most commonly is that to do everything that we can, and reserves, that's what they're there for, is emergencies or maybe understated budgets when we need to put more effort into certain places that you didn't anticipate or expect, and certainly snow clearing and road rehab, in this case, is one of them. So we asked staff to please review it and revisit it. And the motion, I believe, without having it in front of me, was that reserves would cover the overage so that we could keep our proposed budget at 1.5% increase. That was one thing. And I'll just leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
Thank you very much. This council had offered a different offer on the gender guarding, but it was refused, actually. I think it was a political thing. We offered to include gender-specific guards as an overtime issue when it happened, and that got turned down. Our core service review cost $280,000. We've done 62 reports on the Colliery Dam that no one spoke about, well into the millions. We have saved with the core review, just on purchasing, a $5 million initial hit for us that we saved because of purchasing. We've improved contract writing in core service review. We've just had a report about our infrastructure in our finance and admin. And one of the concerns I have, and I've been voting for this budget if people haven't noticed. I don't know if you noticed that my hand was up in favor. Not a stink vote where I didn't raise my hand and just being in the affirmative for being in the room, but actually raising my hand for it. I think staff has done a phenomenal job and done what we've asked them for. This last year was a horrible year for road damage because of hydrostatic lift, freezing and thawing, freezing, thawing. And they wanted to increase taxes, but we said, no, you can find it. And they've done that. The entire council hasn't been attending all of our meetings, and we need to do more of that. We need to show up. When we lose votes, we show up. And one of my biggest concerns and why this budget is important to me, and I'm just using a little Vanna White here, or whoever you want to call it, our wages in a 10-year thing have gone like this. Anywhere from a 73% increase to 53 to 35 across our staff realm. So an average of 53% up goes our cost of wages. It's in the core review, page 63, I think, or 61. And the last report we just had, which I've been struggling with for a week or two now, is in 20 years, we're $250 million short. Excuse me? Oh, I don't want to listen. So we're $250 million short, I understand. We have to make up over a 20-year period. So if you work that back to since 2009, when people fought for the core service review for the budgeting, 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, people fought against it. And if we had an initial savings of $5 million, and it's not repetitive, but we found $5 million because of our purchasing, that means we've probably spent $20 to $30 million extra over that non-core review time. 20 million goes a long way. 5 million goes a long way. And then to have, when I calculate out our $3 billion in assets, and I look at 20-year that we might be $250 million short, the whole idea with reserves is to level out taxation. You collect a little more, and so you can balance those spikes. If you understand finance, you try and save a little to balance those spikes. And since we've started on infrastructure planning, and now I look at this, if I say 20 years, it's way up to that 12 million a year, and we're putting away 1% right now. It's $1 million a year. And we had to fight to get 1%. So if you're concerned about the money and the savings and what we will have in the future, we better start looking at our values of what is our mandatory work and what we are foundationally mandated to do and what our people want. And then we have to look at some of these discretionary issues now. And so for me, this is a good budget. And the core service review was overdue. Any business audits itself. You get auditors in to look at seeing how you're doing, and that's what we did. And they found a lot. And if you look through that core service, we've only done half the community, and we found a pile. And these people have increased the ability for accountability, for contracting, for spending, for purchasing. They've done a phenomenal job. And I'm impressed with what they've done. So our entire council does have to show up to these meetings. And we have to concern ourselves with wages climbing at an extraordinary rate and our infrastructure not having the pot of money to fix it. And so this budget, you're saying it's not increasing everything we do. The world's not at an increasing level right now. The world's in a decreasing mode. People are dying across the world, and we're wanting to make fancy. Sorry.
Councillor Hong.
Thank you. I'm actually really happy with this budget. I would like to see 0% tax increase, but I know that's never going to happen every year. Staff have done a phenomenal job last year and this year for the budget, and I'd like to give them kudos to that. One of these things that I find interesting is when we hear is, we're increasing taxes. Well, sometimes we have to. I don't think nobody here wants to increase taxes. I think we just need to increase taxes that we can provide for the community and ensure the future growth of this community. So one of these items that came up, I guess people were all up in arms about, was snow removal and the roads. Yeah, it's Mother Nature. Freak of nature, things happen, and they're gonna happen. This summer, it might be a drought summer, and we're gonna tell people to conserve water, and well, guess what? Our water revenues are gonna go down. And then we're gonna be short $1 million from user fees because we told everybody to conserve water because it was a drought. Well, we can't control Mother Nature. And I think staff have done an excellent job trying to forecast the future by not overtaxing the residents. And I think that they've done the best that they could, and it looks great. And when situations come up, we do have money in reserves to cover the offset. And that's what we need the reserves for, so I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, I just want to make it clear that I think that our staff have done a superlative job. I think they've done a great job. They have implemented the decisions of the majority of council. I mean, you get no argument from me that this is an excellent staff, an excellent effort. I simply think the budget is a skinny budget, it's a political budget, and I can't support it. It's as simple as that.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller. Last speaker going to call a question.
Cool. Yeah, I like the budget. I don't think it's a political budget. We're constantly asked by the community to keep taxes low. Sometimes we have to raise them, other times we don't have to raise them. Councillor Hong is right. It would be great to have 0% tax every year, but as has been reported, we have a $285 million shortfall in infrastructure repair coming up over the next 20 years, hence 1%, which really isn't going to cover much, but it's 1% we didn't have and we do have. It was reported with the snow removal that taxes were going to go up. Staff did their job. Staff reported the costs and how that would reflect on taxes. It's not up to staff to say that taxes don't have to go up. You can use reserves. That's up to council. So when we heard that it was going up, we met, and I don't believe everybody was at that meeting, I'm not sure. And we decided we didn't want to see taxes go up because of that. That was our decision. Staff simply put out the amount and what it could have cost as an increase in taxes. And so we decided we didn't want to see that. That's our job. They did their job. They're doing a fantastic job. I really can't wait until we get into the next half of the core review, because we do have the possibility to save even more money. And like Councillor Kipp said, right off the get-go with purchasing, millions of dollars saved. So that's well worth doing the core review, which some members of the community don't like the fact that we did that. But we did. And I believe it's a good thing. It was called for. It was necessary. I like this budget.
Thank you very much. It's been moved and seconded. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Show Councillor Brennan opposed. Motion passes. Next item under 8B, Business Improvement Areas Number 1 and 2, repeal bylaws, and the purpose is to introduce the bylaws for first, second, and third reading. And we have a delegation, Mr. Eric McLean.
Your Worship, actually, Mr. Eric McLean is going to be speaking to the new late item under 8D, the new 8D on the the Old City Quarter Association. So,
In my annotated minutes, our
yes,
agenda.
yeah, it's because of the late report, so it's better suited that he speak under that than it.
He's going to 8.
He's going to be under 8D.
Thank you very much.
Thank
So there are no delegations. All right. So we have Business Improvement Area Number 1, Repeal Bylaw 2017, number 7243. And there's recommendation. We've got a total of 6. Councillor Bestwick.
On page 40, there are 6. They're not all in reference to repeal 7243. So do I just do the 3, up to 3 on page 40?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Bestwick. If you could read the first 3 readings for the first repeal bylaw, and then you could do the next 3 readings.
Okay, thank you very much. So move that Business Improvement Area BIA 1 repeal bylaw 2017 number 7243 to repeal Business Improvement Area number 1 BIA 1 bylaw 2013 number 7168 that created a business improvement area and a local area service tax pass first reading.
It's been moved. Seconder. Councillor Yocum, seconded. Discussion.
I see this as one of the biggest mistakes that we have made as a council. I think that the business improvement area bylaw was an excellent way to contribute for the owners and the businesses to contribute to the well-being and the enhancement of downtown, and that the society created after, where the city would kick in money, was an excellent way of acknowledging that the rest of the community, not just the downtown businesses, but the rest of the community really was, it was really helped, and it was a major consideration for people who came here to live, was our downtown, and it enhances every single neighborhood in this city. And to see this gone is, from my point of view, just a real shame, and I am very sorry to be here and be voting on this last piece of that.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
Is this a point that I can actually bring up some questions with regards to the finances at the dissolution of the DNBIA? Because I had heard at the meeting I attended at the dissolution that they had over $25,000 in the bank that they were keeping there. Is this a good time to bring that up?
Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think that would probably be appropriate to bring that in other business. As of now, you want to deal with the repeal.
Thank you.
Okay, my biggest fear in leaving it till then is that once we've actually repealed the bylaws, then do we have any say on how that money is spent or not spent?
This is a bylaw to collect money.
That says to repeal the business improvement.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's to repeal the bylaw to collect the tax.
Yeah, exactly.
So this has nothing to do with assets.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Councillor Hong.
Thank you. I am sad to see BIAs go. I think they're important for businesses downtown, but I think our BIA was too big. It tried to capture too much for all of downtown to the areas that weren't interested in being part of it. And I think in order for BIAs to work, you need a lot of buy-in from the merchants. And we lost confidence in the merchants in BIA 1. As you can see with the new report that was just presented in front of us, BIA 2 is coming forward to a bylaw for a smaller area. So I don't think this is a lost cause. I don't think this is going to be gone forever. Like I stated prior to, it got too big and it imploded, and little ones will pop up and start forming again and doing the grassroots, and I think that's perfectly fine, and I fully support that. So I have no problem with this, and if something new comes up and if other areas want to come before council and to do this again, I don't have a problem with that either. I think it's a good restart. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I will support this, but I want to express my opinion, which is that I certainly hope that Councillor Hong is right, because I share his view that BIAs are important to our city and to our downtown, and I really am hoping that we will see a rebranding, a rebirth, a new format, call it what you will, because I think they are important, and I would not want to see them disappear for the long term. Thank you.
Councillor Beswick.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment that the monies that we collected, and I may be wrong, but please correct me if I am, that we've established a new festival and events category with approximately $110,000 or $115,000 for downtown primary or specifically applications to put on events, barbecues, chili events, concerts, whatever in our downtown core, festivals. Is just a question to staff. That is correct, is that not?
Thank you, Worship. Yes, that's correct. What Council did was you established or you held back the 50% of what you used to use for matching funds. So there is $117,000, and you just at the last finance and audit, I think, allocated about $115,000 of that for events downtown.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
The Business Improvement Area Number 1, BIA 1, repeal bylaw 2017-7243, pass second reading.
Is it seconded? Councillor Kipp, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Kipp. Discussion? Seeing none, call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
That Business Improvement Area Number 1, BIA 1, repeal bylaw 2017, number 7243, pass third reading.
And seconded by Councillor Kipp, thank you. Councillor Fuller.
I wanted to agree that, it is unfortunate that we are having to do this. Nanaimo being one of the only communities or the only community in Canada that actually had its city council contributing monies to the BIA. So it is unfortunate. And it was mentioned about a rebirth. And we're seeing that already with the Victoria Crescent Association form. So hopefully more businesses will get involved. They will get the buy-in from each other. Commercial Street Association. Who knows? Let's hope for better in the future.
Thank you. Call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So now we're on to the BIA 2 repeal bylaw. Before we get into that, Mr. Memek, as 8D, is it 8D that we're calling the establishment of a business improvement area? So that's different than the collection of the tax.
Yes, that's different. So you used to have former BAE number 2, which was part of the DNBIA. The bylaws, as they said, they did not have any successorship, and so we have to go through the process of rescinding or repealing the BIA 2. Then you have to go through the process of establishing the second annual one.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Councillor Beswick.
No,
the repeal of area number 2, BIA 2. Tax bylaw.
Thanks. That Business Improvement Area Number 2, BIA 2, repeal bylaw 2017, number 7244, to repeal Business Improvement Area Number 2, BIA 2, bylaw 2013, number 7169, that created a business improvement area and local area service tax, pass first reading.
Is there a second? Seconded by Councillor Kipp. Thank you. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
That Business Improvement Area Number 2, BIA 2, repeal bylaw 2017, number 7244, pass second reading.
It's been moved. Seconded by Councillor Kipp. Thank you. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And that Business Improvement Area Number 2, BIA 2, repeal bylaw 2017, 7244, pass third reading.
Moved by Councillor Beswick and seconded by Councillor Kipp. Thank you. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next one is item 8C, 2017 Property Tax Rates Bylaw. The purpose is to introduce Property Tax Rates Bylaw 2017, number 7241, for first, second, and third readings. Councillor Beswick, if you could read the motion concerning first reading. You will be right now. There you go. You are.
Okay, thanks. Recommendation that property tax rates bylaw 2017-7241 to set the property tax rates for 2017 pass first reading.
And seconded by Councillor Hong. Thank you.
Question.
Discussion. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. Through to staff, I thought we were at like 14% assessment increase. It would drop down to 13.6. How did that happen?
Through the chair to Councillor Kipp, the total, this is residential rate, so the total residential increase was almost 17%. The 13.64 is just the increase that had to do with the market change. So that's basically the increase in selling prices in Nanaimo. There's also an increase that relates to non-market change, which is new inventory. So the number that we apply is the market change only.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Beswick.
Councillor Hong, Councillor Kipp, neither one of you be offended. Number 2, that property tax rates bylaw 2017, number 7241, pass second reading.
Moved by Councillor Beswick, seconded by Councillor Hong. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And that property tax rates bylaw 2017-7241 pass third reading.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Beswick and seconded by Councillor Hong. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The next item is concerning, it was 8D, and it's the Old City Quarter Business Improvement Area. Mr. Eric McLean. Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Your Worship. After Mr. McLean speaks, there is a couple typos that are in the actual bylaw itself that I'd like to point out to council before they give the readings. Thank you.
Mr. McLean, you have up to 10 minutes.
Thanks for seeing me again. I was here on February 20th to plead our case to apply to be the applicant for BIA2 funds. And although Councillor Brennan wasn't there that time, I know I'm sounding like a broken record. She's heard this before. So I'm very pleased that the speed with which you've attended to this for us, because we have a lot of work to do. And I've seen a draft of the bylaw, which Mr. Mema was kind enough to hasten through today. And it looks good. It looks as if this is what we've been asking for the past 5 years. So thank you. So I guess I'm really here to answer any questions you might have about it. I do have a file of letters of support if you need to have copies of that, but I think you know I've spent quite a bit of time talking to you either on the phone in person or by letter, so I think you know my position and our position on it. So as I say, I'd be glad to answer any questions. My question would be is, assuming this is passed quite quickly, or what is the next step after this? But in the meantime, I'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. So I think Mr. Mema is going to be looking to answer that question for you. Mr. Mema.
So the next steps, if we go through this process, is that we're going to meet with you tomorrow, and we'll talk about next steps.
Oh, we are? Okay. Thank you. Talk about speedy action.
I don't see any questions for you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Motion to receive the delegation. Moved by Councillor Kipp and seconded by Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Now, Mr. Mema, did you feel it necessary to walk us through this? It is a late item, and I know that in order to get things done in time to collect taxes for this year, we do have to move very quickly on this.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The corporate office is going to walk you through some typos that I made because I did a rush job this afternoon, but we'll get that cleaned up. But what we're hoping to do is that once this is approved today to proceed, we'll work with the merchants in the old city quarters to deal with the petition side of the legislation. And we are hoping that we would get this buttoned up in the next week or two if we are late. We are hoping that when we turn on our system to run the taxes on May 8th, would have gone through this process. So we'll iron out some of the details, but we're confident that we'll meet the legislative requirements going through that process.
So this has to be completed by tax notice time.
That's correct.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kipp.
Yeah, thank you. I'm wondering, there may be other groups, and we know that some are organizing, other groups are organizing Victoria Road and that. Is there, can we get a cookie cutter out of this to create other BIAs as they come forward?
It's not the best process, so I would not want to copy it because we are doing a rush job. The second piece to this is that there's always a timing challenge because we only do collect taxes once a year. And so if there are any groups that would like to proceed, it's probably going to be for next year. I don't know if there will be other ways for us, but from a taxation perspective, probably next year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Councillor Beswick.
I was just going to make the 4 recommendations.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McLean, don't go anywhere. There is only 4, correct?
That's correct.
The council directs staff to work with the Old City Quarter Association.
Yes.
That's
Yes,
why that
sorry.
is wondering.
Thank you very much. So just on page 1 of the actual bylaw, under applicant, the applicant means the Old City Quarter, so we're going to take the S. So these are just like minor clerical changes, but I just wanted to point them out before you read the bylaw. Mr. McLean actually brought them to my attention. And then under Schedule D at the very back on page 9 of the bylaw, number 3 and number 4, we're taking out the word fidelity. And we're changing policy to singular instead of policies. So just some clerical changes. I just wanted you to be aware before you gave the readings. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Councillor Beswick, carry on.
Thank you. That council directs staff to work with the Old City Quarter Association, leading to the establishment of the Old City Quarter BIA for a term of 5 years starting in 2017.
Seconded by Councillor Kipp. Thank you. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
The Old City Quarter Business Improvement Area Bylaw 2017, number 7245, to establish a business improvement area in the Old City Quarter, pass first reading.
And is there a seconder? Councillor Kipp. Thank you. Moved and seconded. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And that Old City Quarter Business Improvement Area Bylaw 2017-7245 pass second reading.
Seconded by Councillor Kipp. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. Favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And that Old City Quarter Business Improvement Area Bylaw 2017-7245 pass third reading.
Thank you. Seconder? Councillor Hong. Thank you. Moved and seconded. See, I have Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Just before we vote on this, I would like to comment briefly that this is the type of rebirth that I was referring to a few minutes ago, and I would like to congratulate Mr. McLean and the members of the Old City Corridor Association for the work they've done in past and the branding that they have done so successfully in that area. And I think this is a good move to support them, and I look forward to similar things coming forward in future from other areas. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So, on to the next item. Under 9A, Community Services, Property Maintenance and Standards Bylaw 2017, number 7242. And the purpose is to introduce Property Maintenance and Standards Bylaw 2017, number 7242. We have one delegation, and that's Mr. Leon Cake. Thank you, sir.
A few things when I ran through this bylaw, because there's quite a change over the original old bylaw. One of the first questions I have is in regards to this bylaw. If it passes, does this mean that there would be more hiring of bylaw officers to fulfill this new bylaw when it gets passed?
Mr. McRae.
Yes, through your worship. No, that would not be the case. The Section 8 refers to how the bylaws are processed or how they're reviewed. It would be up to the manager of bylaw services and myself to review that complaint after it goes forward, so there would be no additional bylaw officers hired.
Thank you. On page 55, it says container means, and I just want to get clarification for people that maybe at home listening. It refers to a dumpster, garbage can, garbage bin, receptacle design, intent to hold rubbish, discarded materials, waste products. A lot of people have these containers, these shipping containers on their properties, on their residential properties, which, as of today, they'd be existing on their properties. Would this bylaw change, or this bylaw being passed, would it force the removal of those containers in residential? Because I know if you drive around the Nanaimo, you will see these containers where some people, for example, have carpentry tools, extra wood that they use for their business, and I'm just wondering whether that under container means, would that give the bylaw the right to or a neighbor complained about a container that someone was using, the right to remove it under this bylaw? Would it be forced to be out? Because it does say container.
Mr. McRae.
Yes. Through your worship, what I have to do is take a look at that definition, as shipping containers are generally dealt with under specific shipping container bylaws. Now, this may include that, but again, I'd like to remind council that we operate on a complaints basis. So if there's a shipping container that exists and nobody's complaining about it, there's no issues. There's generally other things that facilitate complaints on those bases. It's not just the shipping container or another garbage receptacle that's overflowing. There's other things going on. So we do operate on a complaints basis.
The reason why I bring that up, because Parksville grandfathered anybody that had containers on their property, residential, that were using for purpose of business. And once they pass their bylaw, then you could no longer use a container for that purpose.
Perhaps we could rely on one of the members of council that was involved in the development of that language of that bylaw with respect to containers. It's my understanding there were no grandfathers, and that it was intended to remove the containers in order to force the property owner to build a permanent structure that could be taxed.
So if this bylaw passes, if you had a container, then you could be forced to take that container off your property?
I believe it applies right now.
Okay. On page 57 under enforcement, it says here that when the Bylaw Regulation and Security Division has received a complaint that real property is in contravention of this bylaw and the complainant has been verified, a letter may be issued directing the property owner to rectify the contravention. It says a letter may be issued. Don't you think a letter should be issued? So that how would that person know that his neighbor might have complained? He doesn't know anything about it. He doesn't get a letter. Then all of a sudden somebody comes from the city and says, you haven't removed that garbage. It says here that that it may be issued. That seems a bit weak to me.
So I think you need staff to give you some assistance on the determination of the language that was used. Mr. McRae.
I'm just seeing things that if I was looking at something like this, I would want to make sure that we are covered on it.
Yeah, through your worship, we operate in a legal premises of shall, must, and may. May indicates that we simply may have a conversation with that property owner. Property owner X complains about property owner Y. Our officer may go over and simply say, hey, we've received a complaint, would you be able to manage this out? Oh, I'll deal with it right away, and it's done. A phone call is picked up, and the problem is dealt with. At the same time, we may issue a letter given the complexity or nature of that bylaw infraction. So we do have discretionary abilities at that point. But again, this is council's bylaw. At their leisure, they can make changes as they see fit.
Yep. And then under page 58, it's under enforcement again, number 5. It says all work done and service provided by the city or its agents to bring the property into compliance will be billed to the property owner and are recoverable as a debt. If the costs are unpaid by December 31st in the same year, the cost will be added to the taxes payable. Now, I did send a letter to me or email to mayor and council, and I didn't get any response on 432 Howard Avenue. And the reason why I bring this up is because there was an RFP that went out for that property for that contaminated soil. That fellow was here one night that he took this free soil and it turned out to be contaminated. And then there was an enforcement of this request for quotation to remove this from his property. And under that heading I just read, in the removal of the contaminated soil, it states in there the city's wages per hour, what someone who was going to be putting a proposal in would have to make sure that they follow the guidelines of what the city, uses as a standard rate for paying its employees. I look at that and I wonder if someone is in violation of this and someone is to be hired to remove this from their property, that you're writing how the cost should be. If someone was a person that did this all the time, was a small businessman who had all the approvals to go ahead and remove contaminated to the site of the RDN, you're telling the policy to him that he has to pay this kind of level of wage. Is that what I'm understanding when I look at this, when I look at what happened to 432 Howard Avenue in regards to the package that was put in there for city wages?
Mr. McRae.
Thank you, Your Worship. My understanding, I believe Mr. Memo might be able to answer this a little more articulate than I can, is we have certain provisions under the collective agreement which require, if we go to outside contracting of staff or services, that we are required to pay the same pay rate that we would for staff that currently exist with the city. So while in other circumstances we would not be dictating that, with the particular collective agreement we have, that's where we're at.
So when someone's in contravention and the city says that it has to be removed, and they give the order, and then someone comes to remove this material from their site, what you're saying is that the price of the...
No, sir, no. I think I know where you're going. You're suggesting that anyone would have to pay wages commensurate with the city's guidelines. No, it's only if the city is forced to do it. So, for example, if you hire somebody to take the soil away, you enter into a contract with them. It's only if you refuse to deal with the issue and the city's forced to come in and look after it because you have not done so. Once the city is bound by the contract, that's where the collective agreement issues come in.
So the only it's actually a question for 432 Howard Avenue, because that was an RFP and that was for the contaminated removal of that soil from his property, which we saw that night that the fellow inherited that soil that was contaminated by his own misfortune of taking it. Is the city of Nanaimo, and I sent this out to mayor and council, is the city of Nanaimo enforcing that bylaw and that retrieval of those monies on his taxes? Will this person have to, this was an RFP, the city's already done the work. I followed it for quite a long time. It stayed on the city website as under evaluation, but it was awarded in March to do the work. So I was quite surprised to see it on the city website to be under evaluation, and then it come out and it was already done. And I went past the site the other day there, and it's completely cleaned up. It's a perfectly leveled out lot. But in that RFP, it refers to removing all kinds of junk, not just the soil. So whatever was on that property was removed under that RFP. The only question I have is, again, to this mayor and council, will someone be bold enough to make sure that this man does not pay for this to happen to him? Because he took that soil, it was moved from one site to another in the city of Nanaimo. Was there a permit taken to move that soil to this site? Because I reviewed your contaminated bylaw. It hasn't changed since 1999. The soil The soil contaminated bylaw in the city of Nanaimo hasn't changed since 1999. This is going to become more of a bigger issue now because we're identifying more things that we find unacceptable than we do acceptable. So I think it's really important that we look at this and we don't have people that are going to be stuck with, not understanding if they inherit something that they thought was free, but it turns out to be a disaster, and now it's on his taxes, and 3 years later, he could be in a position of maybe losing his home. So I really want this council to have some discussion on that, because I did send a letter to mayor and council. I did ask you to look at that. I know you're all very busy, but I'm from Harewood. I grew up in Harewood. I know what hardship is. So when I see something like this, I think the individual thought he had a windfall and got some good fill for his property to finish off his leveling of his home. But if the city's going to send him the bill for that RFP that was done by Milner Contracting, it's already been done. That's everyone here. I don't think that's right. And I think you should think to yourself, what would you do if it happened to you? Would you like to get something for free that could cost you $8,000, $10,000, $12,000? I don't know what that RFP cost, but that site's cleaned up and it's already been done. So somebody here needs to take the initiative to make sure that this man, and I don't even know this guy. He's just a guy from Harewood. And I look at that and I think, boy, can't be justice. Justice has to be done right.
Thank you, sir. Move receipt of delegation. Councillor Kipp, seconded by Councillor Bestwick. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Bestwick.
Question to staff, please. The Property Maintenance Standards Bylaw 2017-7242, does this apply simply to residential properties, or is this across the board to commercial and industrial?
Sorry, my tablet's acting up a bit here. My apologies. Yes, we have multiple bylaws, but this one does take into account both commercial and residential. So we are actually looking at other commercial bylaws to complement this bylaw. We mainly focus on residential with this, but it does apply.
So commercial includes industrial in compliance and regulatory speak, or not?
Through your worship, one of the things about industrial properties is what they're zoned for. So for instance, if you had steel piles, if you had other types of things which would be considered unsightly in residential properties, don't apply to industrial zones.
So there's certain parts of it that apply and certain parts of it that don't apply?
We have both discretionary means and we also have zoning requirements. So if the zoning allows this, then the bylaw would not be enforceable at that point. Whereas if it is allowable or not allowable according to zoning, then the bylaws apply.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hong.
Thank you. I think that was one of the questions that I had wanted to clarify was what Councillor Bestwick said, because container means when we talk about dumpster, well, every business has a dumpster. The whole point of a dumpster is hold garbage. So, it'd be great to have some clarification on which one is referring to, like we said, commercial or residential. I think it is an important, I don't want to burden the staff on it, but this discretion is great, but I don't want the members of the public to read this document and start calling on every business to say that, they have rubbish outside in a dumpster, but they're allowed to. So a clarification for the residents, I think, with cliff notes or something on here would help for people that need to read this or that are interested in reading our bylaws. I don't know who that might be, if Fred's here or not. Oh, yeah, there he is. So, the next thing we know is Fred's going to call us tomorrow and he reads this and says, yeah, well, every business outside has a dumpster. So it's just an extra burden work on staff to, not to take these reports seriously, on complaints seriously from the residents. So a better clarification on these would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to let the speaker, Councillor Fuller, but I'd like to get the motion on the floor. Do we have somebody move the motion, Councillor Bestwick?
The three of them?
First reading.
The Property Maintenance and Standards Bylaw 2017-7242 to authorize property maintenance standards pass first reading.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Okay, it's on the floor. Councillor Fuller.
A couple of questions. One has been somewhat answered with regards to the industrial properties. I look at this bylaw, property maintenance and standards bylaw, and I'm trying to figure out how it might be applied to boarded up, abandoned properties, and I see no means in here that would work with that. I use A and B Sound as an example. It's the most visible property that's sat empty for years. Is there anything in the works to deal with properties like this? Because this property maintenance bylaw does not seem to deal with it.
Mr. Craig.
Yes, through your worship, that's correct, Councillor Fuller. Bylaw staff and myself are taking a look at managing out both derelict properties and residential and commercial zones.
Thank you. And just one more question. The fines, how are they determined? And say I get a fine, taxes are due pretty quick here in May. Say I get a fine in June and decide I don't even want to pay it until next April. Is there any, do you go out and re-fine people if they haven't cleaned it up, or do you just give them the one fine and that's it for the year? And how is the number determined? They look pretty low to me. I mean, you know, if I had some rubbish in my yard and I didn't want to move it for a year, I'd take the $150 hit. Through you to
Mr. McCrae.
Your worship, so there's a couple of things to clarify for council. Number one is there's something fees and fines. Fines are the ticketed process I think Councillor Fuller might be referring to, whereas fees are implied for services that we've done. So the services would be applied to the tax rate or the property taxes for the end of the year. Councillor Fuller's comment about if I didn't want to pay it till 6 months down the road, I think Mr. Mema can speak a lot more articulately to this, but you have up to 3 years to default on taxes at that point, so you can pay off portions of taxes throughout the year, much like some people are on monthly installments for property taxes. You can come in and pay the sum that you owe on that to cut down on your debt.
I guess I may not have been too clear on that one. I get $150 fine in June, do nothing throughout the year, even more rubbish collects. Am I going to get another fine, or am I only going to get that one fine which is applicable?
Yes. Through your worship, thanks for the clarification. So we would give a fine at that point, and if it wasn't remedied, then staff would come on and do what is suggested in the bylaw, which is remove the offending material and then put the bill on the property owner.
Thanks.
No further speakers. Going to call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Move that Property Maintenance and Standards Bylaw 2017-7242 pass second reading.
Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Discussion, seeing none, call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Move that Property Maintenance and Standards Bylaw 2017-7242 pass third reading.
Seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Moved by Councillor Bestwick. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, nuisance property at number 9, 1637 Bowen Road. The purpose is to obtain council authorization to have number 9, 1637 Bowen Road declared a nuisance property. We have a delegation that wishes to speak to this. Mr. Reid Botwright.
If it's all right with your worship, I would like to invite some of the other owners and tenants to join.
As long as you only take 10 minutes.
Yep.
That'll be fine.
Thank you, your worship.
We
Council.
need your name and address or city of residence.
Sorry, I'm used to being behind the scenes. My name is Reid Botwright, 1969 Standard Drive, Nanaimo, BC. I would like to speak to the consideration of the nuisance property at number 9, 1637 Bowen Road. I purchased the unit number 8 at 1637 Bowen Road in 2008 with my young family, and lived there for several years and then moved out about 5 years ago. In that period that I was living there, I experienced and observed an increasing level of nuisance behavior there, several frequent calls to police and bylaw over that period, to the point where it was a consideration that our family made in moving out of there while still owning the property. Speaking from my personal stance, that's what personally affected me. That was my family, that was our life in that area, but also I have been on Strata Council there, and speaking to that, and I believe Mr. McRae will expand on this, we have faced challenges from the strata perspective and the property value perspective. We've had owners leave. We've had, currently we are looking at getting self-managed for our strata and also to look at management companies, because our previous management company ceased their agreement with us because of this property. So we faced hardship as a community because of the nuisance created by this property. That's all I really wanted to say about that, and I'll pass it on to the rest of the delegation to tell some of their personal experiences with that. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Crystal Shannon, and I live at number 3, 1637 Bowen Road. I've owned my townhouse for 7 years, and just as a young student at the time and a young female, you just start to feel unsafe in your own home. Every time you come out of your door, there's different people coming and going, calling the cops constantly for yelling in the middle of the night. The biggest thing is that they leave everything everywhere. So currently in front of my car, I have 4 mattresses, one with blood all over it, that I have to pull into every day and have right in front of my car. And just like last week, they had a piece of, I don't even know what it was, countertop that was on fire outside of their house. And it makes for an unsettling and unsafe place to live as a single female. And it just causes constant stress. So I don't have people over to my house because of the way it looks, the comments that I get. People will call me and be like, oh, the police are at your house again, like it's happening all the time, as well as anything that's running in and out of that home. Obviously, I haven't physically seen drugs or anything like that, but people pulling into the parking lot, they get in the car for 2 seconds, get out and go back constantly. And every type of person that you can think of, individuals walking up to in our parking lot and saying, oh, I heard number 9 somewhere that we can crash at, breaking in through the windows, climbing up the side of the house to get in. It's just never ending. So that's just some of the things that I've experienced, and this would be those are the stories maybe from the last couple months, let alone the last 7 years that I've lived there. So just really looking for a safe place for me to live at this point, and I'll move it on. Hi, my name is Jessie Lohr, and I currently live in Unit 8, right beside Unit 9 at 1637 Bowen Road. And some of my experiences have been my 5-year-old son bringing in used drug needles and putting them on my coffee table. And I have personally witnessed drug deals, and I have talked to some of the people staying there, confirming that there has been meth sold there and been done there. And I've had to call numerous times about domestic violence, because there are some homeless couples that come and do stay there. And I have seen her being hit. I have seen her being thrown out of the residence. I have had things thrown at the side of my residence at 5 o'clock in the morning and waking up my whole family. Sometimes my husband and I have to work the next day with 2-3 hours of sleep because of all the screaming that goes on, and we have easily called over the 4 years that I've lived there about, I'd say, a couple hundred times just on this one unit. Thank you.
My name's Bianna Larson, and I lived in Unit 10, so on the other side, but directly attached to Unit 9 for 12 years. And it's the same as everybody else here. It's a concern. I'm tired a lot of the time because I don't get to sleep, because they're up fighting. There's all kinds of things happening there. Police at all hours of the night, shopping carts back and forth. The sound travels very well up there. So in addition to everything that everyone else has said, it's, I think, lowered the value and even the just ability to sell. We'd love to sell, but I don't know if it's possible at this point because of the situation beside me. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I don't see any questions for any of you, actually. Councillor Brennan and Councillor Bestwick now. Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
I just want to thank you for bringing this forward and speaking to us about it. I know that it can be really difficult to do that, especially when it's a neighborhood that's quite close. So I imagine you had to think long and hard about being public about this. So I want to thank you for doing that, and I certainly hope we can find some way to relieve you. I really do. This sounds like an awful situation for you and all your children.
Other owners and other tenants expressed their wishes to be here but couldn't make it. It's pretty unanimous. Everyone in the community has an issue with this unit, and we want to remedy it as quickly as possible.
Me too.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. I just wish to receive the delegation and allow you to move on as swiftly as possible.
Motion to receive the delegation, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
If we're ready, I just make the recommendation that Council declare 9/1637 Bowen Road a nuisance pursuant to nuisance abatement and cost recovery bylaw 2003-5645, and authorize staff to record and charge for municipal service, including police, required to abate the nuisance.
And seconded by Councillor Fuller.
And if I could just speak to that, please.
Councillor Bestwick.
Not to belabor the situation, but of course 106 visits by the RCMP in 13 months, which averages out to one every 3 days. And we wonder why our costs for each and every call out continues to increase. So the sooner that we can put an end to 100 plus calls to one address in any part of our city at any time, once we hit 100 calls, once we hit 50 calls in a year, 40, 20, 10, I think we could do a lot of goodness for the people that are impacted by responding without them having to come and stand before us in a plea to deal with 100 plus calls in the last 12 months. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Yoakum.
Thank you. Just quickly, for you to the staff, Mr. McRae, I'm assuming the 106 calls and all the complaints to this unit, the owner of this unit is being notified and is well aware of the situation that's at hand this evening. Thank you.
Mr. McRae.
Yes, through your worship to Councillor Yoakum. That's correct. Bylaw Services and the RCMP have attempted to, on multiple occasions, work with the owner of the residence. Those attempts have failed.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
This is the one I keep harping on, the nuisance property bylaw. It's actually 2 years, it looks like, that this has been going on. 2 years, 106 calls. And nothing has been done? Was this even brought to our attention a year ago when it was at 50 calls? To staff through your worship?
Yep.
Through your worship, given I received this file about a month ago, I'm not aware of whether there was an attempt to bring this forward to council. I was disturbed at the number of complaints as well. It's something that I'm going through with the bylaw services review to figure out exactly what a threshold number to this would be.
Thank you.
Follow up to that. Is there a way I can spur that on by making a motion that happen? Because we need that threshold number. 106 calls. Sometimes we get nuisance properties at 20, 25 calls. And I know they talk about, well, it depends on the type of call this, type of call that. This is 106 calls, and that's the RCMP. Who knows how many other services attended in that 2 years? To me, it's ludicrous. And if I have to make a motion that we set the standard number of calls, I'd be perfectly willing to do that, or bring a notice of motion forward, or I will take Mr. McRae's word at it that this is going to be looked at and not put off any longer. I was actually on the committee that set this up, and I was kicked off of that committee because I wanted those.
We understand how
rates.
passionate you are.
Yeah.
We need to deal with the
Yes,
issue
I
at
know,
hand.
but I think the public needs to know that this is going on and that it is going to be rectified.
So if you want to bring that up under other business, please feel free. Mr. Mema, okay, you're off. Okay, thank you. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. I just feel bad for these people that have to endure this. I also have concerns about the resources that we're using on here with the RCMP, like my other colleagues have expressed, but I also have concern about the safety. If what the delegates have said and this woman's been thrown around, the abuse that is happening in that household, you know, what's it going to take to get our attention to see this coming, somebody dying or somebody paralyzed or something that's going to be a tragic incident, and I don't want that to happen. So I think that we should look at this as one of those RCMP priorities that we have discussed, because I think if we count the man hours that are required for them to go there, we're using a lot of resources. So I think we should have a look at this policy again sometime soon. Thank you.
Mr. Mema?
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. McRae is actually going to follow up. He actually has a meeting scheduled for Wednesday to follow up on some of these thresholds and what can be done differently. And you also have your policing priorities to deal with. And so I think you can move along. I think this matter is going to be looked into appropriately.
We've got one speaker left. Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, I know that the police do have violence, I'm not sure what they call it, relationship violence, I guess, as a priority. I know that our bylaw staff work very diligently. So what I'm wondering whether we're adequately staffed to respond in the way that council has indicated they want responses here.
Mr. Mema.
So until the review that we're talking about happens, we can't speak to you intelligently whether we have the resources or not. Okay. We have to establish what those thresholds are, and then work backwards to see what resourcing you need.
Okay, so that's my point then. I think Councillor Fuller said a number. My question is, we can set lots and lots of numbers, but if we don't staff adequately to have any impact on that, it doesn't matter where we set a threshold. So I want to be assured that we have the staff in place to deal with these kinds of things, and if not, I'd like to see something brought forward to us.
Perhaps, Councillor, you could bring that up when the subject comes up. We're dealing
Mr.
with
Mema
this
said
particular item.
he's going to.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So it's now the hour of 9 o'clock. We had a scheduled 10-minute recess. We'll be taking that recess, and we'll see you back here. Councillor Kipp, and seconded by Councillor Thorpe, actually. Thank you. It's now on the table. Discussion. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, through you, I'm just really pleased to see this coming forward. Affordable housing is definitely a priority and should be. And I like the format of this report. I like the I like the process that's laid out with the timelines, which I think are reasonable. I like the key stakeholders being identified, the plans for public engagement, and so on. So congratulations to staff. I think this is an excellent first step, and look forward to working through this this document and the process that it describes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
Yeah, I had an opportunity to sit down with Ms. Kronstall and Mr. Horn and talk to them about this a couple of weeks ago, and I was quite impressed with the amount of work they're doing. Was able to throw some ideas at them. This is, as Councillor Thorpe said, this is needed. And it's not just for the homeless. This is a strategy that will hopefully help with low-income individuals, etc. Increased monies coming into our Housing Legacy Reserve Fund so that we can use those to create more affordable housing. A lot of good stuff happening. This was one of our priorities, and I am thrilled that it's happening.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. Through you, staff, just a question. I see that now Karen, is she in a new addition to the socialist planner? So now we actually have 2 members as opposed to 1, right? Perfect. That's good to know. I just wanted to make sure that we are increasing that because I think it was a huge issue for us. And then it was interesting to find that we only actually had 1 social planner to deal with all the problems. So now we have somebody else helping it to move this forward. Happy to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
Thank you. This is an important issue. I notice now across the country, people are having trouble with housing. In Ontario, interesting, towards some of their problem right now, they're looking at what they call a basic income. And they're going to try it in a few cities to give actually people a basic income above the poverty level, which will be interesting to help with housing too. So I think this is very timely. And I think it goes along with the property maintenance standards too. And that's an important one that we're pushing through. And I will say this is an initiative from our last strategic plan sessions, and I'm glad this is coming forward, and staff has done a good job. One thing I'm always concerned about when I hear there's only 1 social planner or there's only 1 emergency manager, we have to take that differently now. All of our staff have to work in social planning. A bunch of our staff have to work with emergency management. So tasking 1 person with it, they're the idea person, but we need the whole work of all of our staff and community to make these things whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. Really happy to see this come forward for some action or planning and that leading to action. I'm really happy. I started working with the city on this in 2005. In fact, I can remember appearing before council and asking for a standards of maintenance bylaw in 1989 after a housing crisis workshop that we put together along with the university and the Ministry of, at that time, Social Services. So we've come a long way. By 2005, we were putting together a pretty comprehensive plan. And now we're still working on it. It's got some really nice timelines in it. Like to see that. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how it all pans out. One of the more interesting things is that in 2005, the Premier of the day put together a task force, and our Mayor, Gary Corpan, at the time was on that task force, and I was on council. And it was definitely strange bedfellows in terms of politicians and political points of view, but it shows you that when there is a really important need in your community, councillors know how to pull together and knit together a response, and I hope we can do that in this instance to work with our community and our staff and make better housing a reality. I do want to say that I want to see if we can't get some recognition, not of just numbers of housing, but the quality of the housing as well. I think it's really important that we don't just look for numbers with bedrooms and kitchens, but that we look for decent, safe, affordable housing. That's really key. And so we have to be careful when we start wanting to dismantle pieces of our secondary suites rules that we don't pursue numbers over decent, safe, affordable housing. That's something I like to keep uppermost in my mind. Thank you.
Thank you. So I've got some comments as well. Mr. Lindsay, you're the lead on this, I understand?
That's correct, Worship. It's coming through our department, but certainly Bruce Anderson and his team in the community culture and heritage planning section will be working closely on this project.
Thank you. So I just wanted to say that, that in my view, it's not fast enough. You know, I think we rested on our laurels a little bit in 2010 when there was we were talking about low barrier housing and those subsidized housing units. I'm disappointed that the provincial government suggested that the program was over, and then other communities like Maple Ridge and Victoria got millions upon millions of dollars of additional funding on a program that was over. So it's not fast enough. We can't go fast enough. City of Saskatoon, we went there about 4 years ago to FCM and looked at their affordable housing program. It's both rental and purchase, and it's primarily, they've got a number of different disciplines that they look at, including housing first, including non-market housing, and they've got a very efficient program there that is a combination of the city, private enterprise, and government, other levels of government that are all actively involved. And it was working very, very well, and it continues to this day. Under the Housing First, in 2010, we had our homeless count was, or homeless or in danger of being homeless, was at about 300. Speaking with Mr. Horn the other day, we're only at, after adding 126 units of low barrier supportive housing, we're still at 300. So we haven't gained ground. There's other communities that have, from a legislative point of view, have initiatives that assist in the provision of more affordable housing. One that comes to mind that we're constantly reminded about from developers is Langford. When it talks about DCCs and it talks about fees and processing time and understanding of issues, of other issues with respect to creating affordable housing, and that's where we as a government can really shine, is taking some of the barriers down and providing incentives that don't cost you anything. Recently, the finance minister was in Nanaimo to announce the budget after it was brought down onto the House, and one of the things he talked about, and I'm really cognizant of this one, and that is getting supply in the marketplace. Nanaimo normally has, from what I understand, somewhere around 800 units that's on the market, single-family homes that are on the market at any given time. Right now, we're running between 150 and 175. And his comments were you have to get supply into the marketplace and you have to get it there quickly, because otherwise, when you have shortage of supply, the only thing that happens is that prices go up. And the community that you consider yourself to be as being affordable will, in very quick order, no longer be affordable. So I support this 100%. Councillor Kipp.
Your Worship, it's interesting. A place like Langford has $3,000 a door, I understand, when you're getting a multi-up zone. We only take $1,000, and our $1,000 a door has been in place, I think, for like the late 90s when we did the council and did a lot of the changes and stuff like that. And the cost of benefits to the up zone, if you're going from single family up zoning, is our cost for our parks, for example, is based on the first cost of the land, not the up zone land. And when you talk about affordable housing, I'm not certain government really gets into helping with affordable housing. It's developers and development that does that. You talk about 2005, I wasn't certain that committee, it really hasn't done anything. I haven't seen the demise of that committee really do anything that Gary was on. And like I got on council not long after that, and I was on council before. But things like Malasipina Estates, a little housing on Hammond Bay Road, condominiums and affordable condominiums and apartment buildings, density bonusing that doesn't take forever and doesn't demand too much out of it, protecting the environmental areas with density boning and green space, but not making it too expensive and too onerous. So that's the thing. When you look at Langford, $3,000 a door, they got such a small landscape. How many square kilometers are they? We've got a lot more land to infill. We need a mix of housing in our community. People need to live and stay in the areas they've worked and lived in their lives. So I think it's important. And this is a good one, but we've actually got this. The wood's got to hit the ground. The concrete's got to hit the ground. And having another study, that's where we're now, 2017, in 2005 we started this. I mean, all my life I've designed secondary suites in houses when we weren't allowed to, because I knew they were an affordable form of housing. Most of the designers in town have been doing that for 30 years. Secondary suites, pre-plumbed and everything. Our staff fought us for the longest time on that, right? So we have to also change our thinking and make sure that we have this form of housing and affordable housing. I like currently now the Green Party is talking about 30% foreign buyers tax. And that money goes back into housing. So there's a lot of ways we can deal with this. But it's tough to overtax and it's tough to overcharge when the economy is tough. So I really appreciate the fact that we are again moving forward in this 12 years later again.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
Yeah, just briefly, lots of stuff we have to look at, the $1,000 a door, the density bonusing. An idea came to mind that I had with the propensity for small homes. Well, we allow a carriage house on a property to a maximum of 960 square feet. Why can't we allow 2 small homes to that same maximum capacity? So that would solve 2 families choosing to live in that size of a home. So there's different things we can do. You mentioned the mix of housing. Uplands, which is going on right now with the Nanaimo Association for Community Living. We actually did allow them more units. And so that's going to be a mix of market and low-cost rentals. So we are getting there. This is going to be a good thing to do, and we have to stay with it. We have to make sure it's comprehensive.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Thanks. I don't want to let this opportunity to go by without remarking on how successful Nanaimo Aboriginal Centre has been in developing housing. And the housing across from the Quarterway Hotel, perfect example. That organization, headed by Chris Beaton, put their nose to the grindstone, and they got that done. And we've all complained about the housing on 5th, King Arthur Court, and Aboriginal Centre put together the funds. And yes, of course, they required government funds. Government has to be at the table because without them, these kinds of projects can't go ahead. But we have organizations in town that know how to do it, and by God, they do it well. And this is a very good example.
Kudos to every single one of them. They've got very experienced groups in Nanaimo. So the motion's been called and seconded, moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, proposed road closure adjacent to 194 Cliff Street, and the purpose is to obtain council approval for the proposed road closure and sale of a portion of Cliff Street to the owner of 194 Cliff Street. Do we have a mover?
So move that the disposition and sale of part of Cliff Street adjacent to 194 Cliff Street to Cliff Street joint venture be authorized.
Thank you, Councillor Bestwick. Seconded by Councillor Hall. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
That the mayor and corporate officer execute the conditional road closure and sale agreement.
Seconded by Councillor, moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Hong. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
That staff proceed with public notice of disposition and closure of part of Cliff Street.
Seconded by Councillor Hong. Thank you. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
That highway closure and dedication removal pass first reading at bylaw 2017-7239.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Hong. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And highway closure dedication removal portion of Cliff Street, bylaw 2017-7239, pass second reading.
Seconded by Councillor Hong. Thank you. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, development permit number 1033 at 271 Harwell Road. And the purpose is to present for council's consideration a development permit application to allow the construction of a carport and deck within the watercourse setback at 271 Harwell Road. And we have a motion to get it on the floor.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Beswick, seconded by Councillor Hong. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next one, development variance permit number 306 at 350 Westwood Road. And the purpose is for council's consideration a development variance permit application to reduce the minimum lot depth requirement to facilitate a subdivision of the property at 350 Westwood Road. And it's requested that council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to DVP 306. Is there anyone wishing to speak to DVP 306 for the second time? And for the third and final time? Sir?
Your Worship, members
Good
of
evening,
council.
sir.
My name is Alan Lowe, 1750 Patley Place, Victoria, BC. I'm the applicant for this project, and I'm just here to answer any questions you have any.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the delegation? Seeing none?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded.
No,
No, it hasn't?
No.
Pardon me. Recommendation that motion council issue development permit. We have a mover, please.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Kipp, seconded by Councillor Beswick. Discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, development variance permit number 306 at 350 Westwood Road. Am I doing this again? Sorry. Pardon me. Development variance permit number 307 at 106 and 110 Fry Street. And the purpose is for council's consideration a development variance permit application to vary the maximum fence height to allow the construction of an overheight retaining wall with a fence at 106 and 110 Fry Street. It's requested that council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to DVP 307. For the second time, anyone wishing to speak to DVP 307? And for the third and final time?
I would so move that council issue development variance permit DBP 307 at 106 and 110 Fry Street with the following variance. Increase the maximum fence height for a rear yard retaining wall and fence from 1.8 meters to 6.5 meters.
Moved by Councillor Beswick and seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Development variance permit number 309 at 1553 Bartlett Street. And the purpose is to present for council's consideration a development variance permit application to reduce the minimum lot frontage requirement to facilitate a proposed subdivision at 1553 Bartlett Street. It's requested that council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to DVP 309. For the second time, anyone wishing to speak to DVP 309? And for the third and final time? Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Ken Graywell, KSG Consulting, on behalf of the owners. I'm here to answer any questions. And just to clarify the one letter that came in with respect to the neighbor to the west, we have no objection to installing a 6-foot wood fence along the property line to improve our privacy.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for the delegation? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Can we have the motion, please? Move the recommendation, Councillor Yocum, seconded by Councillor Beswick. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Development variance permit number 310 at 355 Wakasiah Avenue. The purpose is to present for council's consideration a development variance permit application to waive the frontage works and services requirements for a proposed subdivision at 355 Wakasiah Avenue. It's requested that council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to DVP number 310. For the second time, anyone wishing to speak to DVP 310? And for the third and final time? Seeing none, we have a mover for the motion, please. Moved by Councillor Thorpe, seconded by Councillor Kim. Thank you. Discussion. Councillor Kim.
This is a motion to protect some of the lands that are important to people like Siroxum and the stadium, the land, and the working agreements with the school district. So I'm in favor of this.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further questions, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The next one is Schedule D of the Density Bonus Review, and the purpose is to provide Council with information regarding the previous revisions, or the proposed revisions to Schedule D of the City of Nanaimo Zoning Bylaw number 2011, number 4500. There's two recommendations. Can we have a mover for the recommendation? First reading. Councillor Bestwick, please.
I'm not sure. We're speaking to the density bonus review?
That's correct. To pass first reading.
And I have it on my page 7, so I'm not sure if this is the recommendation that zoning amendment bylaw 2017-4500.103 to revise Schedule D amenity requirements for additional density, pass first reading.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Kidd. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Number 2, that zoning amendment bylaw 2017-4500.103 pass second reading.
Moved by Councillor Bestwick and seconded by Councillor Kidd. Any discussion? Councillor Fuller.
This is what I believe Councillor Kipp was talking about earlier when we were talking about the affordable housing strategy. To me, this bylaw is complicated, really complicated, and I don't know how often that it's actually used because of its complication. I do recognize that they have tried to simplify it to a degree. I'll support it at this point in time, but I think as we move forward with the affordable housing strategy, we'll have to look at this in conjunction with it, not as a bylaw alone. Thanks.
I wonder if I could ask Mr. Lindsay on this particular one here. That is that I noticed a lot of different scoring on the number of different items. Do we have the ability for a single project to come to us that has a variety of potential public amenities? I guess my best example is the hotel, and I'm trying to remember what the name of it is, at the foot of Lonsdale in North Vancouver, where that hotel and its surrounding condominiums, they went to City Council with the idea that they wanted to see some density bonusing in return. What they ended up with was a fairly large chunk of land, and I think it's about 5 to 6 acres. 5 to 6 acres directly in front of the development that is now leased to the city for 60 some odd years for public spaces. And it was a huge bonus. If something like that came along, could we accommodate it? And just because it didn't follow the cookie cutter framework that we put here.
Thank you, Worship. I'm certainly familiar with the project you're talking about. I don't know the backgrounds in terms of whether those were negotiated through rezoning or not. I suspect they may have been. And I think on that point, I'd like to differentiate here. You could have an application come forward to you for consideration through a rezoning process, and that application may have a number of amenities, whether it be additional park space, public art, affordable housing. All of those things are open and eligible for negotiation as part of a rezoning. The density bonusing is different than that in that it's minor steps in density bonusing built right into the bylaw so that it's an as of right for a property owner. If they can meet these points, it's a permitted use under the bylaw. So I think there's certainly room in the discussion for what you're talking about and having other types of amenities negotiated and secured through rezoning, but this is more of as of right use in the bylaw.
So I wonder if I could, just to follow up on that, I did notice that it does say in here that anything that could be zoned park, for example. Is it possible to zone park on something that public space or PRC, if you will, for something you don't own, but you have on a long-term lease? Like at that one in North Van?
Certainly, at that point, it would be typically you would get with the approval of the owner, but if that was part of the agreement that was negotiated, that's certainly possible, yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Thank you. Councilor Beswick.
Thanks very much. I like the review, and I like the fact that the review indicates what's been taken out, what's been stricken from the record, so to speak, which is really helpful because oftentimes when we do housekeeping and programs like this, not sure what's been removed or amended or changed. I just have one question, please. On page 130, and it is category 3, the parking area within the proposed development includes at least one electric vehicle charging station. Is that does that increase with the size of the development? So is there thresholds that it would go to 2? Looking forward into the future a little bit?
Sorry, Your Worship. At this point, it's not intended to be scalable. It's simply to get the first one in the door. So it's intended to have at least one of the parking stalls designated as an electric vehicle charging station, but there certainly is additional points if you were providing more than one space.
Just a follow-up quickly. So in all likelihood, the size of the development would perhaps get greater points if there were more capacity of electric charging stations, but then of course it would start to really increase the costs and not knowing about how many electric stations would be required. I know in some developments we have complaints actually about that the electric vehicle charging parking spot is never occupied. So it's kind of a catch-22, particularly with in the one instance that I'm making reference to. It's an underground parking spot closer to the entrances and exits, much easier for a person that is in a wheelchair situation vehicle where they're parking is considerably worse off than where the electrical charging station is in terms of location to the building and undercover at least. So and maybe that's a one-off, but I was just wondering if the one station was relevant to how many units would be in a development. Thank you.
I just wanted to say I like the idea that you've now changed to a total of 60 points. Total of 60 points, and so when we're looking at density bonusing opportunities, there's the ability to almost like on a la carte menu basis be able to pick and choose. You might need, if you're looking for 8 points in category 3, for example, just by adding another electric charging station, you could get yourself over a certain percentage, if you will, to get your scoring for each one. So I think it probably gives the flexibility that you're looking for.
What I would say, Your Worship, I think we've attempted to incentivize a lot of the policy documents you have around development, whether it's encouraging green infrastructure, affordable housing, socially sustainable housing. All of those things have been attempted to be captured here, and I think you're right. The program of staff have developed, I think, gives more opportunity, and at the same time, hopefully results in greater infill and density in our neighborhoods.
Thank you. So the motion has been moved and seconded. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next one, liquor license application number LA126 at 620 Terminal Avenue. There's a recommendation that Council recommend that Liquor Control and Licensing Branch approve the application to extend the hours of liquor service for the existing liquor primary license for the property located at 620 Terminal Avenue from 1 a.m. to 12 a.m. Sunday to Thursday and 11 a.m. to 1:30 a.m. Friday and Saturdays to 11 a.m. to 1:30 a.m. 7 days a week. Can we have a mover, please?
Excuse me, Your Worship. I'm just going to excuse myself as I am in a conflict of interest because I own a liquor license. Thank you.
Very much. So it's moved by Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor Bestwick. Any discussion? Councillor Fuller.
Are these, would this, it's interesting because it's not a bar, but would they be covered under Bar Watch or not?
I believe the staff report says that they've been involved in Bar Watch for some time.
Thanks. I missed that. Thanks.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
No further questions? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. 2017 Strategic Directions Community Planning and Development Committee. First one is recommendation on page 171. Can we have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Kipp. Seconder. Seconded by Councillor Bestwick. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All those in... No. Sorry, I'm sorry, Councillor Kipp.
I just want to say we had our first Community Planning Development Committee meeting. Neat committee, good cross-section of people. It's nice to have the voices of the environment person and development person and Bancroft Health Authority that would normally be on other different committees. I really found the makeup of the committees, the ones that I've been on, excellent to see the cross-section of people that were picked for the committees. So I appreciate it. I think this is nice to see options for strategic directions moving forward. I think this will really help our committees. Thank you.
Thank you. See no further questions. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Show Mayor McKay opposed. Next one, Strategic Directions Community Vitality Committee. We have a mover for the recommendation, please. Moved by Councillor Bestwick. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Fuller. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Show Mayor McKay opposed. 2017 Strategic Directions Public Safety Committee. Moved by Councillor Thorpe. Seconder. Seconded by Councillor Bestwick. Discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Show Mayor McKay opposed. 2017 Strategic Directions Public Works and Engineering Committee. Mover for the motion, please. Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Hong. Thank you. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Show Mayor McKay opposed. Motion carries. Next one, Advisory Committee Minutes. Open Public Safety Committee meeting held November 3rd. We have a mover to receive the minutes, please. Moved by Councillor Thorpe. Is seconded by Councillor Brennan. Discussion, errors, or omissions? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And bylaws. Councillor Bestwick. Parcel tax roll preparation bylaw 2017 number 7238. Oh, pardon me.
The parcel tax rule preparation bylaw 2017-7238 to allow preparation of the parcel tax rule related to the regional district in Nanaimo. Parcel tax for regional parks and trails be adopted.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Hong. It's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Correspondence? Seeing none. Council appointments? Notice of motion. Other business? Is there any other business?
Somebody had something under other business. Didn't somebody have something?
Courses, services report and delegations.
Other business? I think
other business. Councillor Kipp.
Well, thank you very much. With this issue of the RDN that was here today, it'd be interesting to have an RDN update periodically on our council agendas. Seeing how our requisition this year is about 17 to 18 million dollars, I think it would be important. So I'd like to maybe sit down with the staff and talk about how we could get a current update. So I'm not certain the rest of the public in Nanaimo honestly knows what we're doing at the RDN. They don't honestly know our agendas. So it'd be nice to get some of that discussed here at this, because although it's just a tax requisition, we still have to vote on issues and do things out there. For example, I think we're 95% of the current $80 million bill for the upgrade to the pollution control center. 99%. And it's what was it, 75, 80 million, 90 going up, and we're 95% of that bill. and it's by requisite 99 you get. So that's important to me. So I would like to somehow bring that up later. And I have one other issue. Thank you very much to staff for the creation of the bus shelter at the Bowen Seniors Complex on Bowen at Howard Avenue. The bus shelter was taken down a long time ago. We had some complaints from the public about standing in the rain and the snow, and staff worked on it and got that. It's a beautiful bus shelter, and I had a call from one of the seniors saying thank you, as they go out of the Seniors Complex at Bowen and stand on the road, and this has been a benefit to them. So I really appreciate the staff reacted to that concern quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
Yeah, I was informed earlier that this would be the time to bring up the possible funds still sitting in the DNBIA bank account, even though they were dissolved. I know staff was tasked with looking at this, and I'm curious to find out whether they have found anything out with regards to these monies, because it was mentioned at that meeting that the monies existed, and it was not mentioned that those monies were being transferred anywhere.
Thank you. Mr. Mellon.
Thank you, Worship. Since the last discussion we had on this, the city received correspondence from DNBIA outlining what's been done to date. With regards to the issue of finances, they are going through the last pieces of that process, which entails, I think, closing of books and audits and stuff like that. And from the correspondence, the indication was that the city will provide you with that information. It will be at that point that probably we can have a fuller discussion with that information in front of us.
Thank you very much. So, last item, question period.
Makes life worthwhile.
Good evening. My name's Tim McGrath, resident of Nanaimo. I'm wondering, the replacement for the RDN director, Ms. Pratt, is that caused because of her assaulting one of the staffers at City Council?
No. No, we're not getting into that, sir. Simple as that. Do you have any other questions? Do you have any other questions, sir? Do you have any other questions, sir? Your microphone is shut off. Do you have any other questions? I'll turn it back on.
Yes, I have another question.
Thank you.
I'd like to question Ms. Brennan on her attendance at the Finance and Audit Committee where the questions were discussed that you brought up tonight. If you had been there, you would have had your answers. So can you explain to me why you left that meeting, why you left the in-camera meeting shortly thereafter, the last council meeting? You beat me out of the parking lot, and I wasn't even scheduled to go there. So could you explain those absences?
I made a promise to myself when I came back after Christmas that if the abuse towards myself became
there was no abuse at the Finance and Audit.
Sir, she's answering
I believe you've asked me about. I believe you've asked me about 2 meetings.
We'll address that one first.
No, you don't. You
sit
don't.
down. Sit down, sir.
Once he sits down, I'll address the question.
Sir, you are not here to debate or abuse a member of council. Sit down. Sit down, sir. No, sir. Are there any other questions? Seeing none. Motion to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll move that.
Moved. Seconded. By consent, meeting is adjourned.